Okay, we're going to get started now. I'm Dr. Richard Boles, and the talk is on ADHD, the genetic basis of dietary supplementation. And first of all, who am I? I am many different people to many different things to many different people. I think of myself predominantly as the physician. I am an MD geneticist that treats patients most of the time. I was 20 years at Children's Hospital Los Angeles and at USC, University of Southern California. As a geneticist, I'm right now in a group practice working at Neurabilities, which is physically located in the Philadelphia area, but everything is done by Zoom. So I see patients across the country and actually interact with physicians around the world in terms of genetic testing. I'm also the Chief Medical and Scientific Officer of NeuroNeeds and one of the three founders. NeuroNeeds is the company that makes a bunch of products that you can see on there, and we'll be talking about those products and how they interact with ADHD. I'm the primary person who designs these products, but I work with a lot of other people, including Dr. Rosignol, Dr. Fry, and many others on that. This talk is coming to you through NeuroNeeds. I was the medical director of DNA sequencing companies. That's really what I do now. Is I don't work for a DNA sequencing company. I in practice and I order from these companies whole genome, looking at the entire DNA, and then based upon that, figure out what the cause of disease in that person is and how to treat that. So it's based upon a lot of this talk, a lot of how I treat ADHD is based upon what the underlying genetics is in a very large number of patients with ADHD that I've seen, and of course that other people have seen and put in the literature. I also do some expert witness situation for legal cases, particularly like Munchausen by proxy situations. And I'm still writing papers, in particular my experience in autism, cyclic vomiting syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome. I'm hoping to get to ADHD soon in terms of writing papers, but I was at University of Southern California. I was faculty with a laboratory and NIH funding and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to do very few case reports this time, unlike my usual, because there's a lot of information to have here. Today is going to be the lecture. I'm going to be giving you the scientific basis. What really is ADHD and what does that mean about what you can do about it? The next lecture, well, the next one, which will be next month, and the exact date and time to be determined. But we have these talks at NeuroNeeds every month now. So approximately a month from now, probably on Wednesday, will be more of a discussion, including a physician there, and bringing in the audience to talk about ADHD in general. This talk, as well as just in general how you treat it and how it fits in with dietary supplementations, medications, and everything. So but today is the lecture. It will be provided on, because I know I'm going to kind of go through things pretty quickly, but the idea is to give you an overview, and the slides will be available on our sites, on our websites, so that you can go later and look at something. If you saw something on a slide, oh, I want to think about that, or I want to get that website so I can check it out. So with that having been said, the first case report is on Carter. He presented at 1 year of age when he stopped developing speech. He was later diagnosed with autism. As is often the case with people with autism, biochemical laboratory testing suggests the possibility of a mitochondrial disorder. I would say 80 to 90% at least of the patients I see with autism have a mitochondrial disorder. DNA sequencing revealed a fairly common variant. 1% of people have the isoleucine to valine variant at amino acid 253 in the TRAP1 gene, which is a gene which is involved in, it's a chaperone which helps proteins to survive under highly oxidative conditions in the mitochondria. In silico modeling, which was done by colleagues at Georgia Tech, predicted that the mutations was in the binding site for ATP, and that gancitron, which is known by the trade name of Chytril, that it will bind to the mutant or the abnormal TRAP1 molecule, but not to the normal TRAP1 molecule or protein. And therefore, we would turn off the mutant protein and hopefully to help with the disease. Carter improved dramatically on Kytril. You can see some of the things here became more talkative, more clever, more focused, less aggressive, less sensory integration problems, got along better with his older brother, and more tolerant of really conditions in general. He went from being a very severely autistic kid that the parents could never dream about going out to a restaurant, to being physically able to handle sitting at a restaurant, staying in the seat, eating, not throwing his food, and really being part of the family there. It made a huge difference. I'm aware of 5 different times he was taken off of Kytril, mostly because of nationwide shortages of the drug. And each time he regressed, and every time that he's on the drug, he got better again. So why am I talking about this kid with autism in an ADHD talk? Because on Kytril, he has ADHD. Some people can look at this as sort of little, like autism minor or something like that, but they really are separate conditions. His autism issues really receded tremendously, and he's mainstreamed in over half of his classes now. His language is excellent. His social skills are pretty good. But he's very highly inattentive, impulsive, and hyperactive. So really, when he's on Kytril, he's an ADHD kid. The ADHD is there when he's autistic, but the autism is so severe that it's really kind of not noticed as much. And methylphenidate is it's a very common drug that's used on that. It has many different trade names, including Ritalin. That has actually helped his ADHD. And so I wanted to show you that, ADHD and autism often go together. First of all, some more caveats about the lecture is that this is personalized medicine that I do, is that you look at the DNA code in an individual and treat that individual for who they are, not as a member of the group, not as just a kid with autism or a kid with ADHD, but a child with this mutation in that gene. And as such, it's individualized, and Kytril is not approved by the FDA or any other regulatory agency for the treatment of autism. This was based upon personalized medicine. There's no official recommendations for genetic testing in autism, ADHD, or any neurodevelopmental disorders. That's not going to stop me from saying what I think are, what I think is the standard of care and what I think should be done, but there are no official recommendations. And then I am a part of NeuroNeeds that makes many of the products for neurodevelopmental and other disorders, including ADHD. So moving along with that, this is a slide that really kind of underlies this entire lecture. It's that these neurodevelopmental disorders are not separate, in that you don't have one or the other and you have to figure out the diagnosis. They often occur together. You can have any of the 3, autism, ADHD, or anxiety, without the others, or you can have combinations. And most of my patients are in this area here that have all 3 of them. It's a better Venn diagram would be the circles are separate, but they're much more closely packed together, so the overlap is larger than the other areas. Here's some other Venn diagrams here. You can see that within ADHD, you have anxiety disorder, depression, conduct disorder. There's different overlaps here. And then here's another one that's looking at different genes. Like autism will overlap, all of this is autism, will overlap everything in the brain. So it will overlap epilepsy, intellectual disability, and also things that you would think of as separate, like schizophrenia, as well as migraine, depression, anxiety. All of these things, they really overlap with each other. So all of these here are different types of brain disorders. In ADHD, actually 50% of people with ADHD have either anxiety or depression. These don't add up because some people have both, obviously. But they are very tightly correlated in that if you have one, you're not necessarily going to have another, but you're likely to have another. So what is ADHD? How does this differ from autism or from any of the other conditions? This comes from DSM-5, the actual diagnostic and statistical manual that people use to say, what is the official diagnosis throughout the world. And for ADHD, you have inattention and hyperactivity. Just ADD sometimes is called either just ADD without the H, it has the inattention only. Sometimes it's called predominantly inattentive presentation of ADHD. So there are all these different words, but basically, what do you mean by inattention? If you look at the green things here, that's what we mean by inattention. A lot of people will say, oh, there's nothing wrong with attention. He can play video games all day. Well, a kid that can play video games all day probably does have ADHD. That's what they like to do because it takes the video games is constantly grabbing their attention. ADHD is an inability to put your attention where you want it to go, where you feel it should go, where your executive functions say, this is what I should be doing. Putting your attention on things you love, that's easy to do. People with ADHD do that just fine. So here are some other ideas. Careless mistakes is they're not paying attention, not seeming to listen. Again, not paying attention, not following through on instructions, trouble organizing things, reluctance to do tasks, easily distracted, forgetful. These are some of the things. Even losing things. A kid loses things all the time. This is what we mean by inattention. And yeah, there's exact diagnostic criteria. If you have 6 or more of these before age 17, etc. But this gives you an idea. So if you just have the inattention, some people call that ADD, or the predominantly inattentive ADHD. To get the combined presentation, you have inattention plus hyperactivity/impulsivity. Think of these two as together. Hyperactivities of the body and impulsivities of the mind, but basically things are going too fast. Fidgeting, that's what you often see in older, like adolescents or adults. They're not jumping all over like the little kids are, but they're fidgeting or squirming. They keep leaving their seat. A lot of younger kids will run around and climb things. When they play, they do not play quietly. Always on the go, talking excessively, blurting out an answer before a question is completed, trouble waiting their turn, interrupts others. So this is really hyperactivity and impulsivity is one concept that they go together. If you have this plus inattention, then you have ADHD. It doesn't matter if you have intellectual disability or if you're in all honors classes. It doesn't matter if you have autism or you're a social butterfly. It doesn't matter on anything else. This diagnosis is based upon the criteria, regardless what else you have. Obviously, there are always criteria. You have to have had symptoms before age 12. Yes, there is adult ADHD, but when you look back in time, they had the symptoms beforehand. 2 or more settings. So this is not just, oh, he does great at school and pays attention, but at home he won't listen to me. Well, that's not it. There's many different settings here. Usually it's home and school are the settings, but for an adult it may be work, it may be social activities. It has to reduce the quality of functioning. It's not just the person is like a fun person, has lots of ideas and is all over the place, but does great at school, great at work, great at home. That's not a disease. That's just personality. And it's not better explained by another mental disorder. That doesn't mean these things can't happen at the same time, but if another mental disorder explains everything, then you don't have that. So with this criteria, how many people have it? Well, a lot. 5 to 7% of children, about half of that for adults worldwide. In the United States, estimates are between about 4 million children and about 6 million adults have ADHD. That's really big. This is a common disorder. A lot of people have it. And at least half the people that have it don't even know it. So you saw this before. I'm showing it again because what is ADHD that's different from anxiety, that's different from autism, that's different from conduct disorder, that's different from depression, that's different from everything else? What makes it ADHD? What it is executive function. The little executive wearing the suit and tie and everything that says, maybe we should be doing our homework now, or maybe we shouldn't be talking so loud, or maybe we should be doing something. It's that executive saying, it's the emotional centers are just going wild and they're not listening. And I'm not just talking about like the id. It would also be like the superego. It's not listening to that either. have too much anxiety because you can't tell yourself, this is really not an issue. I shouldn't worry about this at all. But you are worried because the executive function is not able to control the rest of the brain. And these are really the three areas that are really, if you break it down, working memory, cognitive flexibility, inhibitory control. Inhibitory control is pretty obvious. I explain that as maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Cognitive flexibility, you take the same tool and like a hammer and you just apply it to everything. They have a hard time saying, well, maybe I'm thinking at this from the wrong direction. Maybe I ought to reconsider it from another angle. And then with working memory, you have a hard time with working memory because they have a hard time concentrating on what they're thinking about. So there's only so many things you can have in the head at one time if you're being distracted. So that really is what ADHD is executive function. It's the prefrontal cortex of the brain. That's where the issue is. Another way to look at this is the poo pathology test, which is, I know it's so tongue-in-cheek, but I actually think it really can tell you something. Each of the characters on Winnie the Pooh have a different pathology. ADHD is definitely Tigger, totally distractible and jumping all over the place. Pooh is not hyperactive, but definitely distractible. Piglet has anxiety. Rabbit certainly OCD. Roo is kind of a little bit out there, staring off into space. Eeyore is depression. And of course, Christopher Robin is making all of this up in his head. And so he's, not quite there. So schizophrenia. But the idea is that people do not have one or the other, but people have a little of this, a lot of that, little of this, none of this, medium amount of that. Is in each person, it's more complicated than that. Is that each and every one has different amounts of it. And this, by the way, is me when I took the test. I think of this as sort of the nerd triangle sort of thing. I'm kind of out there, kind of, make sure everything's right and maybe a little spacey. But this is how you get to it. And if you just do poo pathology test and Google, you can get to it really easily. It can tell you something, but the idea is that those conditions are not separate diagnoses, but they're really, each and every one of them is a spectrum. So ADHD is a very serious condition. I have to admit that before one of my sons developed ADHD, and in particular it became really severe, that I never really thought of this as such a serious condition. Oh, it's just ADHD. That's really common. That's, everything else is much worse in this area. But it's that I was wrong on that. ADHD is a serious condition. This is from a paper, and all of these here are worse in ADHD. This is the normal person here, the average person. So, and this is the average for a person with ADHD, and these are the error bars. If it doesn't cross this line, that means it's statistically significant. And on this, everything that is statistically significant, they put on here. A lot of things they didn't put on here because it crossed the line. But, so you can say, well, like college completion in years of schooling, that's a lot less than people with ADHD. Well, that makes sense, how well they are subjectively. Yeah, that makes sense. A depression, neuroticism, that's higher. But look at all of this stuff. Obesity, diabetes. The bad cholesterol is elevated. The good cholesterol is low. The body mass index, that's because the executive, maybe I ought to not have another Pop-Tart. Maybe I shouldn't have another piece of pizza. Maybe I should eat better. That's affected. Maybe I shouldn't smoke. Lung cancer is much higher in ADHD because of smoking, number of cigarettes per day, whether you smoked or not. And then there's some things like, of all of this stuff here, what is the most significant? Age of first birth. Obviously, impulsivity goes into that and having sex too early, not using birth control, etc. But that's actually the most significant change here, is how old you are when you father or have your first child. And then it affects the parent's age of death, because if you have ADHD, it's highly genetic. It's likely one of your parents has, but not by any means a certain. Because of all these things are bad, There's early mortality, and people with ADHD, their mother and their father have shorter lifespans. So this is a really serious disease. And the reason I'm showing you this is to say that this needs to be treated as a serious disease. It is serious, and you need to treat it serious. And it's not just like, oh, my kid with autism also has ADHD, but that's really not that important. It is important. The autism is important. The ADHD is important. It needs to be treated separately. They're treated with different medications or supplements to some degree. It needs to be taken seriously. Obviously, injuries, traffic accidents, and things like that, impulsivity, that increases. Not only that, unemployment, divorce, suicide, age-related risk factors. It really is a disease that is not just affecting their well-being or their ability to work in school, but it affects pretty much all aspects of behavior, and thus it affects all aspects of life. So I mentioned that it's genetic. These are all different studies and how inheritable it is. If it goes all the way to 1.0, like a few of the studies do, that means it's entirely inherited, entirely genetic, with absolutely no component of environment. Most conditions are environmental and inherited. Like heart disease is about 0.2, 0.3. There's an inherited component, but it also depends on how you live your life. Cancer is inherited, but it also depends on how you live your life. ADHD and autism are the most inherited of all common disorders. That doesn't mean there's not an environmental component, but that does say that there's a very high heredity component. And that's saying that this is genetic. And I'm a geneticist, and so when I go into the genetics of that, I'm not saying that genetics is all of what it is and that there's nothing else in there. There are environmental components, but the genetics is most of what makes ADHD. You're pretty much conceived with it or born with it. Which genes? Very complicated, don't need to go into this, but you can look on the right-hand side. Those are the genes most associated with it. It's pretty much all different things in a brain. Wiring the brain, wiring the synapses, dopamine levels, cellular recognition in communication between the cells to line up to build the neural networks. What I'm going to be showing you is I'm going to be showing you all of these genes and everything is that the genes that predispose towards ADHD are the genes that are needed to build and maintain a brain. That's what it is. They're not separate genes. They're not ADHD genes. They're just brain genes. And when there's a problem with a brain gene, you're more likely to get any brain disorder, ADHD, autism, anxiety, depression, any of them. So the genes that I showed you on the previous list, all of these here are associated with ADHD, but that's only 10% of ADHD. Another 10% are variants I didn't show you on that slide, but all common variants in all 23,000 genes, the common variance is only 20%. That means 80% of ADHD is not in the common variants. What are they? They're rare variants mostly. Copy number variants are rare large variants, like a deletion and a part that's missing, a part that's added. That could be 10 nucleotides, 100, 1,000, a million nucleotides. These are all increased. And you say, well, what genes are involved? Again, involved in electron transport, energy metabolism. Energy metabolism, ion channels. That's how the electricity works in a neuron. Ion channels again. But these are genes that are important in operating a brain in general. And then these genes overlap with the genes for autism, schizophrenia, bipolar depression, you name it. It can be anxiety, it can be epilepsy, it can be migraine headache. The genes for ADHD overlap with all of these other conditions. The overlap with autism is very great, but it also overlaps with the others because these are genes in general that are needed to build and maintain a brain. This is the $1 million, that's actually the cost, machine that I use, that the laboratories have, that when I order whole genome sequencing, to sequence all of the DNA in somebody, all 3 billion nucleotides. This is what the machine looks like. And this part here is about the size of a refrigerator. So it's like 2 refrigerators next to each other in size, to give you an idea of the scale of it. And this machine can read all of the DNA of a person in about 4 hours. Okay, bear with me for a second. I'm going to be talking about autism again, but I'm going to bring it to ADHD very quickly. I put my clinical data together less than a month ago on autism. From January through August of this year, 2022, I saw 20 patients with autism, with or without other problems. And those 20 patients had whole genome sequencing done at Variantex. That's the lab I use. And also trio, that means the mother and the father were sequenced as well, which is necessary because to be able to find a new mutation. And so of these 20 with autism, a monogenic, that means a single gene, causal, it causes disease. And the variant is considered to be pathogenic or likely pathogenic. It's very, very highly likely that that variant is the cause of disease in 15 of the 20. So 75% of the patients this year through August had the DNA said, this is it, this is the cause of your disease. About half of them, the diagnosis was listed on the laboratory report, and half of them it's because I went back and did all the raw data myself and found something that had been missed by the lab. Most of the ones that were missed were genes of uncertain significance, and I did additional research and found that they are indeed likely, very highly likely to be related to it. It was more likely that I found an answer if they had intellectual disability that was at least moderate or worse. 92%, 11 out of 12. But even if those with mild intellectual disability, normal or above normal IQ, almost all of these were normal intelligence. Still 4 out of 8 had an exact diagnosis. So it's still 50% in people that, let's say they just have, like ADHD or something like that without intellectual disability. Because tics often are PANS, which is an immune system problem, there certainly were more diagnoses and those didn't list tics than those that did. So I can go into that in detail, but I want to show you these are the genes which had, of the 15 that had the mutations that cause disease. And they're in all different pathways. But there's a couple of things I want to show you. Everything in color is a treatable pathway. And every single one of them I said, this is the cause of autism, here's the treatment, let's try it out. Historically, about 50% of the time, the treatment that's based upon the gene makes a significant difference in the patient's better, and about 50% doesn't. Either I can't figure out how to treat it, or there is no treatment, like some of the ones that are not colored. Or the treatment doesn't work. So most of them are treatable, doesn't mean all of them got better. Historically, I'd say I do the whole genome sequencing, about half of them will get better. But what I want to show you is that these have to do with mitochondria, and then the cation channels involve the mitochondria, protein turnover involves the mitochondria, and so does the amino acids. So all of the different, the 4 colors here, which is most of them, are either primarily or secondarily involve mitochondria, and that they are treatable pathways. The other thing I want to show you is that all of the red ones also have ADHD. The ones that are in gray, their mental retardation is so severe, I don't know if they have ADHD or not. You can't tell. If they can't do anything, you can't tell if they have it. This one did not. One of them did not. So when I'm talking about this is the genetics of autism, this is the genetics of autism plus ADHD. And it's all different pathways, and it's mostly treatable. Here I want to give a case report, one more case report. Sometimes there's not a single diagnosis. Oh, one other thing I want to mention. These here were all de novo mutations. That means the parents didn't have it. It was a new mutation in the child. And you can only tell that by sequencing the parents. And these were inherited variants. Like X-linked, the mother is a carrier and then had an affected son. or autosomal recessive, the parents are unaffected carriers and the child got a double dose. So it's mostly de novo, meaning a new mutation. Some of them are inherited. Um, but sometimes there's not a single diagnosis. Here's a 12-year-old, has ADHD, but has other issues as well. And the whole genome sequencing found a mutation in the transporter for glucose 6-phosphate across the endoplasmic reticulum. That's pathogenic for glycogen storage disease type 1b. And he has hypoglycemia, lactic acidosis. He never fully recovered from what was considered encephalitis, which is probably hypoglycemia. He's got other issues, and all of these issues in green are because of glycogen storage disease, and that's treatable in a completely different way as you would normally treat that with a very strict diet. But in addition to that, he's got pancytopenia. Pancytopenia is anemia, red cells, bleeding, low platelets, and immune system problems, combined immunodeficiency from abnormalities of neutrophils and monocytes and lymphocytes. All of these come from the blood cells. So he has a CVID diagnosis. He's had multiple infections, pancytopenia. All of these are down, and there is a mutation, a frame shift variant, so that absolutely causes disease. In a gene that's involved in breaking the DNA so that you can make antibody genes, and that's pathogenic for immunodeficiency. So this patient, you look at this and it says, well, what can cause all of this? Well, it's two different genetic disorders. Nothing will cause all of that. So there's not always a single answer. So treatment overview. And I'm going to be showing a slide similar to this every once in a while and a little bit different. So how do you look at this from neurodevelopmental disorders in general? So this is ADHD and autism. Well, you need to address the factors that are important for good health in everybody. If you're not sleeping, it's going to be really hard to fix anything. If you're not exercising, if you have really bad diet, and if you're taking toxic substances, Tylenol, many of you might know, is somewhat toxic. Alcohol, narcotics. There's smoking. There's a lot of bad stuff out there. So if you're not doing the right things and you're not avoiding the bad things, it's going to affect health in general, and it's going to be really hard to fix anything if you're in bad general health. So address factors that are common to neurodevelopmental disorders in general, like autism and ADHD, mitochondrial dysfunction. I'm going to go over that a little bit more. It's very critical. Neurotransmission, ion channels, inflammation, autoimmunity, and others, including the gut microbiome. These are areas that come up over and over again with neurodevelopmental disorders. And then address the areas that are specific to the individual genetic defect in that person. And that requires TRIO, that's mother, father, and child whole genome sequencing to figure out the underlying cause. And then an out-of-the-box approach. Okay, this is the cause. It's never been seen before, or it's been seen 5 times in the world before. What do we do about that? Taking a look at the literature, taking a look at the biology, and trying to figure out how to do something. Okay, so going to be talking now about mitochondrial dysfunction, which is one of the things that's really important, but I think it's the most important one. The basics. In mitochondrial dysfunction, you get neuromuscular disease. Because the nerves are electrical, muscle requires power as well. It requires a lot of energy to run the nerves and the muscle. So if you have a problem with energy metabolism, most commonly it's a brain disease. It can be the rest of the nervous system as well, the peripheral nervous system, dysautonomia, enteric nervous system of the gut, but also you can see muscle problems. In adults with a known mitochondrial disorder, 60% of them have a mental health disorder, many different ones. So there's definitely mitochondria affect the brain because the brain requires a lot of energy, and the brain is the site of mental health. And how do you treat these disorders? Antioxidants are the main therapy. Antioxidants are used in brain disorders in general. They're being used today in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington, autism, schizophrenia, depression, all of this stuff. OCD. Antioxidants are critically important for brain disease. But what about ADHD? I'm supposed to be talking about ADHD this time. Well, ADHD is closely related to autism, depression, and schizophrenia. Some of the other conditions, it's a little bit, you know, and these are all disorders in which mitochondria is important. So ADHD is closely related to many other conditions in which mitochondria are important. Maybe it's important in ADHD as well. And how does that inform on treatment? Well, you can imagine that maybe is reality. These are only some of the scientific papers that show that ADHD involves energy metabolism, mitochondrial dysfunction. The ones that I have on the top ones are my favorite, but there are a lot of scientific studies that show that ADHD does involve mitochondria, energy metabolism. Increased oxidative stress in particular, if the mitochondria are not working right, you have increased oxidative stress. Okay, so ADHD is serious, and therefore you want to treat it. Most people with ADHD are put on medications. I'm not against medications. My son is on it. I'm just saying that medications without supplements might not be the right answer. Is that methylphenidate is the #1 drug used in most of the world for ADHD. It goes by 100 different trade names, including Ritalin, but there's a lot of other ones out there. And each preparation is a little bit slightly different in various ways, particularly about how much is given out at what time of the day. But this drug adversely affects oxidative metabolism. This drug causes mitochondrial dysfunction. So if you already have mitochondrial dysfunction and you're put on this drug, it's going to get worse. Just don't take my word for it. All of these papers say that. This is fairly well known. These papers have been around, some of them 2006, 2008, 2007. Some of them are more common. There's a review, this one here. So I'm not saying not to use drugs. This is a serious condition. You need to treat it. I generally, in my patients, start with supplements and then use drugs if needed. Some patients, the supplements work great and they don't need drugs. Some of them, they need drugs, but the supplements, they need less drug. So one way with the supplements is some people don't need the drug or they need less drug. But even if they need it, the drug, you really kind of need to fix the mitochondrial dysfunction before you can make it worse with medication. Anyway, that's my philosophy. So you're saying that mitochondrial dysfunction is really important in autism, it's really important in ADHD. How do I know if my kid has it? This is a slide I use I talk to medical students about. It says, well, how do you recognize mitochondrial dysfunction in general? This is for first-year medical students, so this is people that are going to go into every different field. It's not just for pediatrics. It's certainly not just for autism or something, or for ADHD. But you can see this is the slide I show the medical students, mostly brain, but also muscle to some degree. What muscle? All muscle, including heart muscle, eye muscle, etc. But you can kind of look down the list. I could put 20 different slides like this and not cover half of what I know about can be caused by mitochondrial dysfunction. The reason is that every cell of the body needs energy for pretty much everything it does. And if it doesn't have the energy right, things are not going to go very well. And if you have other mutations and other genes plus environmental insults, you could get disease. So think about, mitochondrial dysfunction as putting stress on the entire body, all cells, all organs. It won't cause anything, but it predisposes towards disease throughout the whole body, particularly in the nerves, mainly the brain, but the rest of the nervous system and in the muscle. How do you treat mitochondrial dysfunction? Well, you can increase energy supply, and there's a lot of the cofactors and vitamins that do that. Here are some of them. Exercise will build more muscle and give you more power. Decreasing energy demand. I say to people, you need to live your life, and I don't want you to live like a hermit. That will just make you like a couch potato. Things will get worse because you'll have less muscle over time and more fatigue. But maybe you shouldn't go running and drink alcohol on a day that you're sick, that it's 105 degrees outside, you have an asthma attack, and you have final exams coming up the next day. Try to avoid high energy demand situations. Try not to pile them on top of each other. And those are some of the high energy demand situations. Antioxidants, that comes up over and over again. This is the antioxidants. The Mitochondrial dysfunction causes a pro-oxidative environment. The antioxidants fight that to go in the other direction. The pro-oxidants damage DNA, protein, membranes, etc. And then, of course, you treat the symptoms. Treat the mitochondria, but also treat the symptoms. And so many of these are medications. And I could show 20 slides of how to treat the symptoms, but that's the general idea. Okay, just a little introduction to the next thing is that what does the data show about in ADHD specifically and dietary supplementation? And the California desert can occasionally be very beautiful. And this is my little girl 3 years ago. It's a lot bigger now. Here is the publication. I'm going to be showing you some snapshots here. Then I added some commentary. Acetylcarnitine. If you want to go back and see the slides, you want to see the literature for yourself, don't take my word for it. What did the actual papers show? Here they are. But in 2 studies, acetylcarnitine was superior to placebo. That's like a sugar pill in ADHD. B6 and magnesium are often given together. One study on B6 and magnesium together showed that it was effective, and also magnesium is deficient in most people with ADHD. Hair gives you not just what you ate today, but long-term deficiency. 3 studies on zinc. 2 of them it was beneficial, 1 it wasn't. Essential fatty acids. There are 8 studies, and this is DHA and EPA. I'll go into this a little bit more, but 6 of the 8 studies showed that essential fatty acids were helpful. So putting them together here instead of spending like 20 minutes on the data, and I'll show you where you can find all the data because it's on my website. ADHD is related to oxidative stress, suggesting antioxidant therapy in general might be helpful. Acetylcarnitine, magnesium, B6, zinc, and essential fatty acids have been shown. Many studies have shown that vitamin D is deficient in ADHD, suggesting that might be helpful. And then there are 3 other ones here that have been tested in many other neurodevelopmental disorders, including autism, and they're used a lot in autism, and they may or may not be helpful in ADHD based upon the fact that they're helpful in autism. CoQ, folate, which is B9, and B12. But given the fact that they're important in the mitochondria, I think that they probably are important in ADHD. And then 1, copper. Copper is actually high in ADHD. Copper supplementation might not be the way to go unless it's carefully under a doctor's prescription. Some doctors use very high dose zinc and they use copper to balance that out, and I'm not talking about that. In that case, it's under a doctor, that's important, but I wouldn't just willy-nilly go buy in huge doses of copper. It's already high. So if you look at the green at the bottom here, the data suggests that a comprehensive approach for not just taking one thing, but taking several things is a reasonable way to attack ADHD from a dietary perspective. And this is, I want to show you an assembly line. The turn of the century over 100 years ago, the turn of the century 20 years ago, Ford Motor Company, Hyundai. Cars are built a little bit different than they used to be, but the basic idea is the assembly line. What if you give this guy a bunch of vitamins? Are you going to make more cars? No, you're just going to make more chaos. What if you put an energy surge in this machine? You're not making more cars, you're making more chaos. Giving extremely high amounts of one supplement may not be the way to go. You say, well, is energy really on an assembly line? Well, here are you might have remembered this from high school biology, the electron transport chain, the Krebs cycle. This is an actual photograph. Now, the color are computer simulations, but this is an actual photograph of the electron transport chain and the Krebs cycle. They're actually integrated together. It is an assembly line. Electrons enter one place and they leave in the next. The idea with an assembly line is you got to get them all vitamins. Is that I find far fewer side effects if you give a whole bunch of different things than if you give a whole lot of one thing. Jim Adams published a study over 10 years ago in autism that showed that a vitamin mineral supplement is helpful, But this is in autism, and I want to show you that hyperactivity is one of the three main changes. The three major changes he saw was hyperactivity, tantruming, which you can say, well, that's sort of impulsivity, and receptive language. So three of the major changes he saw are really in the ADHD category. Bonnie Kaplan has been looking at this mostly in adults with anxiety and depression and other psychiatric disorders, and has found, she published this paper here that showed that explosive rage was helpful in two children. Her vitamin cocktail, which actually is very similar to the Adams formula and very similar to my formula, because it's pretty much a Mito cocktail with a whole bunch of different things in it. But I have a whole lot of kids that I've seen that the major problem is episodes of rage, and then they go crazy, and some of them are very violent. And it does respond to dietary supplementation in the vast majority of cases. I also do DNA to find the underlying cause and treat that as well. And then Bonnie found out that safety and tolerability. Dr. Adams found the same thing, is that if you give like 40 different vitamins and minerals together, that it's very safe and tolerated in people with different diseases and different ages, and their blood levels show no problems with the liver or kidneys or anything. And I've noticed, I've been doing this for years in my own patients, so I've never seen any significant side effects. So what I have done is taken the information based upon the latest in genetics to design the product line of NeuroNeeds. And these are the people, and there's about half of them are on this slide. We need to make another slide that adds a whole bunch of others, including there's a lot more women that are involved. Dr. Griesbach is an ADHD doctor, but she does other things as well. She's also my son's doctor that treats that. And then you might know Richard Fry, Michael Ellis, Mark Mentz, and this guy here, Dan Rosignol. He's been involved in this, Jared Skolron and J.R. Kobier. They are all different people in different areas. Most of them are pediatricians, not all of them, and they have helped me to design these products. So Spectrum Needs is in a powder form, comes in two flavors, lemon and berry, has 33 active ingredients. It's the mitochondrial cocktail. Energy Needs is very similar, but it's a capsule form. I recommend this in anyone that can swallow. 40 active ingredients. It's got a little bit more to it. Coenzyme Q10 is extremely important. Coenzyme Q10 comes in two forms, ubiquinol and ubiquinone. You don't want the none. Jared Skolron showed me that. So you want to avoid the none. This one is 5 times more bioavailable in studies. It's more expensive, it's about twice the price, but it's 5 times, you need 5 times less of it to get the same blood level, so it's really cheaper in all. This is really the CoQ that's needed. This is not in the powders or the capsules here because it's an oil and it doesn't mix in the powders. Or there's powder inside the capsules as well. Other issues is like, do you want soy in it versus limonene? That's the oil, the lemon peel. Can you swallow a small capsule? This is my Q Needs here is ubiquinol and limonene oil. So it has superior bioavailability to most of the products out there. And it's a very good price compared to the other premium products that have high bioavailability. And they're much smaller gel capsules than many of the competitors. Omega-3 fatty acids. They have many different roles, including in inflammation. I showed you a study that 6 out of 8 studies showed that they were helpful in ADHD. In one of those studies, it's not one of the studies, it's a meta-analysis of looking at all the studies together. If you just throw that into Google, you can get it. Improvement in hyperactivity, lethargy, and stereotypy. That's like doing the same thing over again, like hand flapping. The two major forms are EPA, that's what it's really called, and DHA, that's the real name. It can have there are taste issues with it, so that it's best to take it in capsules if you can. There are ones out there that are in liquid, but I'm not aware of any liquid krill products, so I'll get to that. Omega-3s are very helpful in the brain, but they're also helpful in general health. So for blood pressure, for cardiac function, for and also skin, hair, and nails. They're important for blood sugar and a lot of other things. So what often comes up is fish versus krill. Most of the popular brands out there are fish oil. Fish oil has some major advantages. Fish is a lot less expensive than krill, so the premium brands, the really expensive brands out there, though some of them come down in price recently, they have very high dose fish oil. So what they try to do is just overwhelm the membrane to just throw omega-3s into the entire body, to try to, not just to circumvent a deficiency. Yeah, most people that don't eat a lot of seafood are deficient in this if they don't take a supplement. But to put a lot of omega-3s to help the health beyond that of just a normal diet. And so that's important for the rest of the body. But the thing is that fish oil, the omega-3s are bound to triglycerides, and it cannot enter the brain. It's impossible to enter the brain. What it needs to do is that it goes to the liver, it converts it to a phospholipid, and that gets into the brain. So that's fine if you're trying to reverse a deficiency. But when you're trying to you're taking your premium product that's extremely high dose and hope that a whole bunch of it gets into the brain, that's not going to happen. The liver's only going to convert a small amount of it. So you're not really entering that much into brain beyond just the basic amounts. If you really want to put a whole lot of it into the brain to heal the brain, it needs to be in a phospholipid-bound state. Krill oil is naturally bound to phosphatidylcholine, and it naturally directly enters the brain. This is the actual chemical thing that shows that it enters, and this one right here is the scientific data that shows that yes, in fact, it doesn't enter the brain unless it's phospholipid bound. So, but the problem, so why don't you just take krill? Well, the krill oil, the dosing's not enough for the heart. For heart, you really need to throw in extremely high dosing. And to put enough krill in for heart health, it would be extremely expensive. So I had my son on a common brand of fish oil and on a common brand of krill oil. And he took both of those together for whole body health and for brain health. And then just recently, we put the two of them together in omega needs. Now, what about phosphatidylserine? Because phosphatidylserine is in a brand that was taken off the market by the FDA because they chemically bound it to the omega-3s, and you can't do that. That makes it a drug if you chemically bind it. But so there is no phosphatidylserine product, omega-3s, that's available in the United States. But phosphatidylserine naturally occurs. No chemical conversion is necessary in sunflower seed. So to make this, I took krill and fish oil put together, so you have lots for the heart, phospholipids for the brain, and I threw in sunflower seed oil on phosphatidylserine. That's also good for the brain. So this product has all three of them here. So those are the products that I recommend for people with significant neurodevelopmental disease, with autism, with or without ADHD, severe ADHD, epilepsy, etc. For behavioral issues on top of that, a lot of behavior occurs at the synapse. The synapse is where, the two neurons don't really completely meet. There's this little gap here. The neurotransmitters are released and go to the next neuron. And so the neurotransmission, where the neurons connect, is really important. And one of the things you see particularly in younger people, like children, teenagers, etc., is the balance between the excitatory neurotransmitters. Those are neurotransmitters that turn on the next cell, versus inhibitory neurotransmitters that turn off the next cell. That this balance is off, and they have too much excitation. They either have a mutation which increases excitation, or they have a mutation which decreases inhibition, or both. And this is very, very common in epilepsy, migraine, ADHD, anxiety, and autism. I see these mutations very frequently. And so what a lot of the doctors will do is to say, okay, let's give supplements that decrease neuroexcitation and increase inhibition. And so that mostly gives antagonists to decrease glutamate. That's the main turn on the next neuron, excitatory, and things that increase GABA, that's the main inhibitory, turn it off neurotransmitter. So we're looking for what will turn off glutamate and what will turn on GABA. GABA is a really key inhibitory neurotransmitter, and the GABA interneurons, or the tiny little GABA neurons that connect other nerves together, are very, very sensitive to mitochondrial dysfunction. And if you have mitochondrial dysfunction, they're some of the first ones to go off. So how does energy metabolism cause an excitation? You think, oh, they have no energy, right? The nerves are going to be decreased. No, because the nerves that turn off the nervous system are preferentially affected. They need more energy. That doesn't make any sense until you think about the cookie jar metaphor. 2-year-old says, I want a cookie, Mom. Nope. I want a cookie now. Nope. Cookie. Nope. Cookie. Nope. Cookie. Okay. That cookie is gone. Okay? The inhibition has to be constant. These little GABA interneurons have to constantly be saying no, or the excitatory neurons will get their way. They use a lot of energy by constantly firing no, 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 all the time. So in energy deficiency, these go first, and the nervous system goes into excitation. So what can you do to increase excitation, decrease inhibition? And that's a big problem in ADHD. You can increase GABA. To increase GABA, you can give GABA. You can give L-theanine. Caffeine is what people think about, how does coffee and tea affect you? But the soothing aspects of tea is the L-theanine. It doesn't sedate you, but it soothes you. And it does this in large amount by boosting GABA. 5-HTP also works on similar, but it also works on serotonin. That's another inhibitory pathway. And then the B6 and magnesium help these. So I was often recommending that my patients go over the counter and get all of these. I put them in COM needs. But this is something, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. This is sort of like you take like Motrin. If you don't feel better on the Motrin, why take it again? This is something not to make the disease better over months, which is what you're doing with the fish oil, the CoQ, and the Mito cocktail. But what can you do to increase the behavior today? Okay, so standing back to the whole thing. So how do you treat it? What's a holistic approach? Diet, natural antioxidants, blueberries, and etc. will help. Exercise, frequent and in moderation, getting good sleep, avoiding bad things. That's just general lifestyle. I said that you really kind of need that to get good health before you can really attack disease. You need to be in a better state. Supplements. Multiple supplements to hit different parts, not just one supplement. High dosing, bioavailable. That means it actually gets from the intestines and doesn't go out in the toilet. It gets into the brain. Activated forms, so they go directly to the enzymes or wherever they're needed. Medications. Sometimes medications are needed. ADHD is a serious disease. Stimulants are sometimes needed, or SSRIs like Prozac, Zoloft, SNRI like duloxetine. Are sometimes very helpful. And then that's not taking away, I almost always recommend some degree of counseling for my patients, but it's not counseling like sit down on the couch and how did your mother make you crazy to do this? No, it's not like that. It's counseling says, okay, you have this disease, and how can we change your life so that the disease is better off, and how can you change it, and how can you look at your life in ways that makes it meaningful for you? What can you do to look at this from a different perspective is to try to make as much as you can with your life despite your issues that you have that maybe, they may be some obstacles, but they're not going to stop you. They just may make you have to find ways around it. And then, of course, finding the appropriate accommodations for education and testing is also very important. And that sometimes helps if you have a genetic diagnosis, because you're not just any hyperactive kid now. You're a kid with a known diagnosis, and the teachers take it more seriously. Not that they should take it more seriously. It's the same kid, but we don't live in a perfect world. So, my recommendations. High-powered mitochondrial cocktail. NeuroNeeds does make it, but there are some other companies that make it, and I've already told you about one of the other brands. The dose is recommended based on the patient's weight. They're generally on the labels. I do check blood doses of carnitine and vitamin D, 25-hydroxyvitamin D, make sure they're high enough. These mitochondrial cocktails do not have CoQ, or they don't have enough CoQ. The blood level doesn't go high enough. The oil does not mix in the powders. It's got to be added separately. I check blood levels. It's got to be ubiquinol. The essential fatty acids, same thing. The oils do not mix in the powders. Krill oil is best for brain health, goes directly to the brain, but fish oil is also really good for the rest of the body. And I would say, for brain health alone, krill oil, but for considering general health and everything, think about using separate supplements or a supplement that combines them together, such as the omega needs that we sell. And so this is sort of a basics. These three are the main basics. So your high-powered mitochondrial cocktail, your CoQ, your essential fatty acids. But everybody's different, and everybody there's going to be a different perfect treatment. Some people will need more different things, depending upon if they have really bad migraine. I usually give riboflavin or B2. If they have really bad constipation, I'll give magnesium citrate, etc. Or based upon a blood level, or based upon the genetics. So you really need to have this in this patient because this is where the problem is. If there's a lot of anxiety, hyperactivity, or insomnia, consider changing the neurotransmitter balance. And the easiest, the least, to have the least side effects, the safest way to do that is to use over-the-counter supplements. Calm needs is one way to do it. There are also medications beyond that can do that. Understand that diet and supplements are both necessary and synergistic. There are things in blueberries that you cannot buy in a supplement, but there are more. But a supplement, you could eat all the blueberries in the entire grocery store and the supplement will have more of some things. They're both good diet and supplements. One does not make up for the other. You need both of them. They're synergistic. Next bullet point, do not neglect your lifestyle in general. You need to do the right things and avoid the wrong things. Medication. Dietary supplements are not necessarily instead of medication, but in addition to. Are there people that the supplements are all that you need? Oh, definitely. I've seen many of them that they don't need medication on the supplements. Their ADHD is under control. But there are many others that need some medication as well. This is a serious disease. Everything from having children too early to smoking to car accidents. I mean, you name it. I mean, this is an issue. It needs to be treated. And again, these are general recommendations. They're not meant to circumvent or contradict your physician's advice. Everything that you do, supplements, medication, everything should be in coordination and discussion with your physician. And these are just general ideas to think about and discuss with your physicians. So, and then here, this is pretty much the same thing as before. Just look. So, some of you might be saying, well, you just came out with this product, Focus Needs, and you didn't say anything about it at all. That's true. Focus Needs is a different type of product. I mean, the people that generally take the products that we've been talking about are generally people that have significant diseases and that really want the best treatment, and there is a cost to that. And it may not be appropriate necessarily to give all of those treatments to somebody who just has very mild ADHD and nothing else. And many times parents will say, well, his sister, she's got some inattention and hyperactivity. We don't know, if he meets diagnostic criteria, but is there anything like that you can do? What would you do? I don't want to give her all of this different stuff. It's too expensive, and I really, it's a lot of time and effort and everything, but is there just one product that you can give on that? And so I thought about that and said, well, I want to be able to reach more people than we are reaching now, people that maybe don't have the budget for these other products, or maybe their kid just doesn't need as much. And also, just anybody, including adults, college students, whatever, that just want to boost their focus. They don't have a disease, but they just want to take things that will naturally increase their focus. And so it came up with Focus Needs. Focus Needs is a box that contains two different things because the vitamins that come in powders do not mix with the oil. Again, it's a general physical problem. So there are two things in here. This has the oil, and this is the same as omega needs, really. And this has the vitamin stuff. And what vitamins in it? The acetylcarnitine, the B2 riboflavin, B6, B9, which is folate, B12, vitamin D, magnesium, zinc, and L-theanine. The ones that I showed you that are important in ADHD. And then here, I've already talked about omega needs. It has the fish oil, the krill oil, the phosphatidylserine. I didn't mention the xanthan. That's a very important antioxidant that comes in the krill. It's why flamingos are pink or red, because they eat the krill and the shrimp that are red. And why are they red? They are red because of this chemical here, astaxanthin. So if you ever wondered why flamingos are pink, that's it. And the capsules are red, by the way. So this is one product sort of thing for people that have minor, lesser problems. So this is significant neurodevelopmental issues, autism, very bad ADHD, autism with ADHD, epilepsy, these sort of things. Choose your mitochondrial cocktail. If you can swallow, I recommend energy needs. If you can't swallow, lemon or berry flavored. One of these, plus CoQ, plus omega. But for price or for ease of focus or something like that, you want one product. It comes in 2 different bottles, but one box should do it. If you want more information about this, particularly like what is the data behind all this, my website, I wrote everything on it, neuroneeds.com. If you go to the conditions at the top and go ADHD, you can find many, many things there, but this is one of them. You can click on any of these and it'll tell you exactly what the data is behind any of that. This is how you can get there directly. There's a lot of other information there. And if you're interested in the DNA testing to find out exactly why you or your child has it, speak to Lori, my coordinator. And here it is, neurogenomics@neuroabilities.com. I did not come up with this name of the company. There's no O in neuroabilities. It's not neuroabilities. The O is missing. People always type that in wrong. Again, this is going to be available on the site, so you can find these direct links. And thank you very much. And I've gone over, but I hope that I've given a lot of information that can be helpful. And remember, next month, we'll have a question and answer, and we'll also have a physician in to really kind of discuss in a conversation, less intense on this sort of stuff. So it might be more easy to understand. And certainly if you have questions, then go ahead.